Welcome to our first video in this coding series. It's brought to you by Cross River Rail and Building Block Studio. Well, today we're going to be using MakeCode Arcade. This is a free coding environment and a tool that we can use to make retro style games. So these are the kind of games that you would use on your old Game Boys and old style devices, kind of like from the 80s and the 90s. So the game we're going to try and make is based around the theme of archaeology. Before we get started into our game though, what we're going to do is have a bit of a look at the MakeCode Arcade environment so that you can get familiar with how it works. So like I said, it's a free tool. All you have to do is navigate to arcade.makecode.com. When you get there, you should see a screen that looks pretty similar to what I've got on my screen just here. You can scroll down, you can see all the different types of tutorials and example games. So that'll give you a really good idea as to what style of kind of games we're looking at making here. I'm going to click on the new project button and I'm going to give my project a name. So I'm going to call it Digger. He's going to be digging for something. Okay, so when my screen loads here, it's going to look pretty familiar to some of you if you've used Scratch before. So usually with Scratch on the left hand side, that would be where your scene is. That's where your characters and sprites are going to perform their instructions or their actions. In the middle, we've got a bunch of categories of instructions. So all the different instructions that we can use to make our game. So I can click on these categories and all of these instructions are kind of grouped up together. And finally, over here on the right hand side is our coding canvas. So the idea is I can drag my instructions from the categories onto the coding canvas. But coming back to this left-hand side again, you can see that it looks like a handheld device. Well, this thing is actually a simulator. You're actually going to be able to play your game using this little device here. If you're lucky enough to have some real hardware as well, you could use that hardware and play your game for real in the real world as well. But you don't need the hardware. This tool, this simulator, is going to work really well for us. The first step that we're going to take is learning how to use the controller to control our main sprite. Now, sprite's a funny word. It's just another word for our main character or our character. Our characters are called sprites. So when I come on over, I can see that I've got different categories. I'm going to click on the sprites category and I'm looking for the top instruction here that says set my sprite to a sprite with a blank little picture of kind of player. And I'm going to drag that over. Now, if I just drop it in the middle of the coding canvas, you'll see that it has this little hatched out outline. And that's telling us that the code isn't connected, so it's not going to be used. However, if I drag that up, you'll see that it wants to snap into place in the on start here. So now that I've snapped it in here, I can read my code and it's going to say something like on start. So when my program has started, we're going to create a new variable called mySprite, and we're going to set it to something here, to this blue section. What I can do though is I can click on that little square there, and you can see that I've been given this little editor. What I can do, if I wanted to, I could click around and I could use this. It's kind of like Microsoft Paint, and I could paint my own little characters here. Now you notice that you don't really get a whole lot of detail, and that's the whole point of this. Is remember, it's about building a retro style game, so the resolution or the number of pixels that games used to have back in the 80s and 90s wasn't very high. So they're trying to keep with that theme. So when you come into this editor here, you're going to find that you're not going to be able to create a really high resolution picture. Just trying to do your best with what you've got. I'm not much of an artist, but I hope you are. I'm going to flick over to the gallery, the gallery tab, and I'm going to try and find a picture that I might be able to use. So I've selected the little guy, just like so. But I do encourage you guys to build up a character. I'd love to see what you guys have made with it. I'm going to hit the done button, and now when we come back to our coding block, you can see that we've got our sprite set up with an image of a character now. So just by adding that single instruction, you can see that our simulator on the left here has come to life. Our little guy has been selected or been put on the screen right in the middle there. We can't do anything with it though. If I try and drag him around, he's not going to move. Let's change that. Let's try and work out what we can do to get this sprite to move. Now we've got a bunch of categories. I think the category here that we need is pretty obvious. We want to use a controller. So our top instruction here says move my sprite with some buttons. That sounds like something that we want to be able to do. So as soon as I drop that in, you'll see on the left hand side my character has kind of refreshed, and now I can control him I can either use the little joystick with my mouse, or I can use the W, A, S and D keys on my keyboard to be able to move him around, which is a whole lot easier and should feel pretty familiar if you've ever played a game like Minecraft or something like that. Okay, so we can actually move our character around. We can actually drive him off the screen if we need to as well. So, got the basic controls working, which is good. Now, if we think about our game here and the experience that we're trying to build or have for another person who's going to play this game, if the game just starts and there's a player right in the middle of the screen, there's a fair chance that the player who's trying to play this game isn't really going to know what to do. So what we should be looking at trying to do is build some sort of information, or give the player some information on what they need to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the game category and have a look at some of the other categories, the subsections that are in here. And we've got this one that says prompt. So it says a splash screen. So let's drag that up and let's put it maybe as our third instruction. What you'll see is when I've dragged that in, my simulator has refreshed and it's trying to show something on the screen. Don't quite know what it is, but let's try typing in and see what happens. I'm going to say dig for bones. So I want my player to be able to dig for bones. So my game is kind of paused on that splash screen. If I hit the A button, it's asking for the A button. Then we get back to the screen now where I can move my player around. So already, if I hit the refresh button, already my game is starting to become a little bit more interactive, and I'm making it a little bit easier for the players to understand what the purpose of the game is. So as fun as our game is, I don't really think that just driving a little character around is going to be all that enjoyable over the long run. So what we really need to do is we need to be able to design a level where we can play. So we're going to do that by looking at the categories and the scene. So the scene is the word or the keyword that we're looking for that's going to describe the background and the area that our character can interact with. So clicking on scene, I'm looking for something called a tile map, and I'm going to drag that up. Now a tile map is basically just the screen, and if we were to break it up into blocks and think of those little blocks as little pictures, and each of those pictures we can call a tile. So we're basically creating a map for all of the tiles. And we can sort of see what that looks like. When we click on that tile map, we get that editor experience that we kind of had when we had the opportunity to build the look of our sprite. This time though, we're trying to build the background, remember. So I'm going to go over to, let's see, we've got this forest theme, but we've got these background images, if you like, that kind of represent, I guess, the underground, which is really cool because I want my character to be able to dig underground. So you might notice that there's a tile here, and there's kind of like a left looking tile, and there's kind of like a right looking tile, and then there's a center tile. Well, these tiles are all designed to work together. So if I put the left hand one and the right hand one over the other side, all lined up, and connect them together, you'll see that they kind of look like they're meant to be. And that's how the designer has designed them. And then if I put my left hand, my right hand one underneath, I can do the same thing. And it's going to come to life pretty quickly. So the designers have done a great job in designing these tiles so that I can build a really large level and make it look great. So what I'm looking for is I've got a ground level and I've got an underground level. Now, the idea is I don't want to fill in the middle here because what I want to do later on is I want to be able to fill this up with some dirt that our player can dig through, and I also want to be able to place some bones and some other items that our archaeologist is going to be able to dig to find. So think of it this way, he's going to start at the top level and he's going to dig his way down, but he's not going to be able to see what's underneath the dirt. Now I could go and fill this in with dirt, but the problem is if I use a tile here, later on when my code comes to work with it, it's a little bit harder to remove tiles from the game. So to start with, I think we're just going to make a nice little editor level just like this, and we could even fill the bottom in if you like as well, so that we've got a bit of a bottom level. And we're going to hit done on that. So if I test my game now, I still get my screen, and I click A, and next thing I notice that my player has now gone into my level, and I can still control him. He can still go off the screen, so you can see here that my level is a lot larger than what the screen is. So I really want my character to be able to explore the whole scene. Okay, what can I do? I click on the scene, and let's scroll on down. I've got things for the screen, I've got some effects, I've got some of these tiles, I've got some collisions, I've also got a camera. Now a camera is always kind of, well, there's a camera that's viewing the scene, but what we can do is we can have that camera follow our sprite. So let's set that up as our next instruction and see what effect that has. So I'm going to dig for bones, and now the camera is going to try its best to follow our character around. So as he goes through the scene, you can see that the camera is going to try to do its best to keep it either in the center of the screen, or it's going to let him go off to the sides of the screen. All right, looking good. All right, well that's probably a good place to end today's episode. In the next episode, we're going to be adding those dirt tiles to the rest of that tile set, so that we can start moving around and digging through the tiles that we're going to place on the screen. All right, until next time, I'll see you then.